Just wanted to take a second. Is there anything that's stood out to you all as most helpful so far? We're about to enter into a section that's going to really focus on churches, but I would like to speak up and what's helpful to you? Yes. Follower of Jesus and not a fan. Okay, good. Think, sir, you had something? Emphasis on prayer and fasting. By the way, if you don't know this, there's significant disciple-making movements around the world. Josh talked a little bit about that, probably talk a little bit about it more as we go. Over 1% of the world's population are in disciple-making movements, like significant numbers in China and India. And I think one of the ways to understand them more than disciple-making movements is their prayer and fasting movements, reflecting in disciple-making. There's a high correlation between prayer and fasting and effectiveness in disciple-making. Anything else stand out?
As disciples mature, evangelism just becomes a natural.
As disciples mature, evangelism becomes a natural thing. No, it's really true, especially of a culture that emphasizes that definition of a disciple. So I like John Mark Comer, recommended his book as Book of the Year, but it's weak on that third part, is that you're not really going to be like Jesus, who devoted 65% of his time to making disciples, until you grow to make disciples like Jesus did. It's a very important part of our growth and development. Okay, we have a couple of videos we're going to show you now. One of them is going to summarize research that we completed a few years ago on the state of the North American church when it comes to disciple-making culture, and then the new exciting research. So if you would, please watch this with me.
The North American church has a disciple-making problem. In 2020, Discipleship.org and Exponential released a national study. It revealed that 95% of churches do not have a culture of Jesus-style disciple-making. We call this the 5% problem. The 5% problem in a single sentence is, disciple-making is the core mission of the church, Matthew 28:18-20. Yet over 95% of U.S. churches are not doing it at the level Jesus modeled. First, the study revealed a massive gap between aspiration and reality. Pastors report high commitment to disciple-making, but the actual outcomes of church growth, new disciple makers, church planting, or stories of multiplication do not match. Pastors dramatically overestimate impact, claiming high percentages of active disciples and disciple makers and new commitments to Christ, while showing little or no corresponding growth or multiplication. They have intent with little to no impact. Many pastors believe their church has a disciple-making culture, yet they lack a simple, effective, reproducible model, clear metrics for success, significant time spent personally equipping people for disciple-making, and leaders who see disciple-making as a core. Many churches have become program-driven versus relationship-driven. They rely on programs to add people, but they do not mobilize ordinary believers to personally make disciples who make disciples. This produces consumers, not reproducers. Meanwhile, there were no American disciple-making movements. Though thousands of rapid, multiplying disciple-making movements exist globally, the U.S. had none that meet the biblical and statistical criteria used in the study. Many churches seem to have a confusion surrounding the biblical definition of disciple, discipleship, and disciple-making. These churches talk past each other and inflate their self-assessment. The bottom line is this: the American church is largely failing at its primary mission. It is adding some people through preaching, praise and worship, and programs, but is not reproducing disciples who reproduce disciples. This explains the stagnation or decline of Christianity in the U.S., despite decades of programs, conferences, books, and sincere effort. So, what do we do? Senior pastors must lead a radical shift from program-centered, addition-focused churches to Jesus-style, relational, reproducing disciple-making cultures. Until that happens, the 5% problem will remain, and the American church will continue to see high aspirations, but disappointing and even heartbreaking results.
So let me talk to you about what we found, and there's some good news I'm going to share with you. But before we get there, let me just describe the challenge that we all face as church leaders when it comes to the desire to have a disciple-making culture. I'd like to start with a quote from C.S. Lewis. It's one of my favorite quotes about the purpose of the church. In fact, could you all read this with me? It's from his book, Mere Christianity. And he just sums up, like, over history, here's the real purpose of the church. Let's read it together. The church exists for nothing else but to draw men into Christ, to make them little Christs. If they are not doing that, all the cathedrals, clergy, sermons, mission sermons, even the Bible itself are simply a waste of time. God became man for no other purpose. So the mission of the church really is to create little Christs, or what we would say as disciples. So when you think about it, here's the 5% problem. We can go to the next slide, please. The 5% problem is that 95% of churches do not have a culture of disciple making. Of course, that number saddens and astounds us. What that means is that what we've been talking about so far today is not the reality in most churches. Life on life disciple making is not the functional mission of our local churches. That pastors and leaders are not personally practicing Jesus-style relational disciple making, and pastors and leaders are not equipping their members to be effective disciple makers, meaning that the people do not know how to be disciples who make disciples. Now, we've seen different than that in what we've been talking about this afternoon, but the reality of most churches is like what I've described. So if that's the 5% problem, let's talk about the 95% reality. So I want to speak to you as somebody who's worked at this a lot. And I want to just start by acknowledging that we live in a consumeristic culture. Since the early 1960s, we have all been discipled by our culture to be consumers. So we're always wanting what's best. We've been taught the customer is king. So when you go to church now, without realizing it, people are thinking, when they go to churches, they're thinking of themselves as customers. What can the church provide to me, the consumer? What can the church provide to me, the customer? It's odd because in our church, I'll often have these conversations with people, and they want to tell me what they're looking for in a church. And I'm like, okay, you're the customer, and I'm the provider of services for you. Now, sometimes I want to say, I don't say this, but I want to. So really what you should want in a church is to know the lordship of Jesus so you can pick up your cross, deny yourself, and serve him. We're good about that here. You want to come? But they're not thinking that way. So here's how it works itself out, though, because when you're in ministry, and you know this is true, we want to be successful pastors and preachers. And how are you going to know you're a success? In this cultural environment, is that the numbers are up and to the right? More bodies, more bucks, more buildings. And so what happens is, then in churches, 85% of our energy and resources are focused on preaching and the preacher. And by the way, I'm for good preaching, okay? I just don't think that we should be thinking that a successful church is comprised of the 3 Ps. Like great preaching and preachers, praise and worship, and programs. even if those things were super important, in a way they are. I'm not trying to say they're not important. They've just become too important. And I can tell you, as a senior pastor, the amount of energy, time, and effort that you have to put in, if that's your scorecard on Sundays, is really significant. And although I think these things are important, I think we've got to balance them with the disciple-making reality. Okay? Now, let's say that, just put aside all that for a second. Tim Keller, I think, really said it well when he said, 1 hour on Sunday cannot sustain a Christian life for the other 167 hours a week. We are now living in a culture that, in terms of belief systems, is increasingly hostile to biblical Christianity, and there's no way that 1 hour on Sunday morning is going to make faithful disciples of Jesus. So the things that we've been talking about really need to become a part of our churches, okay? So, having said all of that, now we want to talk to you about 9 churches and 9 networks who have broken the code, and they are disciple-making churches. So if we can, let's watch this video together.
The 2025 Discovery: Disciple-Making Churches in North America. In 2025, the Discipleship.org team, Bobby Harrington, Josh Howard, and Mason Eagle, returned to a question that still matters. Is real multiplication actually happening here? So they searched across North America for Level 5 disciple-making churches. Churches that don't just make disciples, but make disciples who make disciples, who make disciples, who plant churches. And what they found changes everything. Level 5 multiplication isn't theoretical. It's not overseas. It's already happening right here in 9 very different churches and networks. Different sizes, different styles, different contexts, but the same result. Multiplication that is normal, measurable, and reproducible. For years, we've known the problem. Over 95% of churches are not reproducing. But now, we're seeing the solution. Not a theory, not a model to admire, a roadmap you can follow. Because beneath the surface of these churches is a shared operating system, 7 practices that turn churches from addition or plateau into multiplying movements. At their core, these churches are different. Disciple-making isn't a ministry, it's the culture. It's not a program they run, it's what they do. So deeply embedded, you'd have to work to stop it. Everyday people, nurses, coaches, students, recovering addicts are making disciples. Not professionals, not specialists, people. And those disciples, they multiply. Generation after generation, until new churches are born. And at the center of it all, 7 shared practices. Not copied strategies, but lived convictions. First, leaders have unshakable clarity. Disciple-making is the core mission. It shapes every decision. Second, simple, effective, reproducible models, built on obedience, not just knowledge. Simple enough for anyone to live and multiply. Third, prayer and scripture are the foundation, not additions, but fuel for everything. Fourth, relational disciple-making, life on life, not rows, not programs. Fifth, clear pathways. Every believer knows the next step and is expected to take it. Sixth, mission beyond the walls. Everyday life becomes the mission field. Seventh, leadership alignment. Every leader carries the same vision, the same language, the same mission. This is what was missing. Not inspiration, but demonstration. Not ideas, but evidence. Level 5 churches exist. They are here. They are working. And now, for the first time, we can clearly see how they do it.